always, in this first bonus episode of the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast, I speak with attorney Gordon FireMark. We talk about diverse ways of marketing your business and how to utilize legal support staff in a more effective manner. Listen in for more. Hello, good morning to you, good afternoon to me, good night to others. Who knows? We're all around the globe. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. I'm your host, Etta Rosa, and with me today, I'd like to introduce the amazing, the wonderful Gordon FireMark. How are you, Gordon?
Wow, thank you. The amazing, the wonderful. I'm great to be here. Thank you, Etta, for having me. I'm feeling excited about talking with you.
Yeah, I mean, today I really wanted to focus, like we were saying in the pre-interview process, I really wanted to focus on providing that picture and painting that picture to our legal support staff listeners, especially because you do a lot of things and you do it well. It's not like you're, failing at anything at this point. You're a podcast host and you've been many years. You're actually one of the first I believe first lawyers, right, to actually do podcasting.
Yeah.
And you also run your law firm and you do all these speaking engagements and all the things. And we actually met, so the listeners know, we met at the Podfest in Orlando. But you are from LA. So tell us a little bit about you and really how do you play this juggling game? Because it completely is a juggling game.
Well, as you said, the name is Gordon FireMark. I am a sole practice lawyer in Los Angeles. I've been practicing in the fields of entertainment, media, and business law since 1992 when I graduated law school. Been a solo most of that time. I started work at a small firm with a guy who loved the litigation process and was, well, let's just say his constitution and his style is definitely that of a litigator, and that's not who I am. So that relationship didn't last very long, although we remain good friends, and he refers me business and I refer him, and it's wonderful. But I hung out a shingle sort of just out of a need to get out of that environment at the time. Joined in a partnership a few years later that lasted for a few years, and then one of the partners decided to leave practicing law and go. He actually went to China to start teaching English, and he, met his wife there and those kind of things. And my other partner and I, we've remained good friends and colleagues ever since. But solo is my way. So, practicing entertainment law is a little different than many areas of law because it's full of nuance and it's full of inside baseball, just how things are done in our industry. And to be honest with you, the legal aspects of things often don't come into play until sort of late in the game. And I'm a transactional lawyer. So deal making is more about the business side of things, business affairs, and just sort of understanding the moving parts of our industry and that when it comes down to the legal, contract is a contract is a contract. And there are certain ways we do things that defy all logic of other contract law. It's real. It's just not the same. And when you're dealing with intellectual property, people get hung up on who owns what and who's in control and, those kinds of things. Anytime you're dealing with creative people, logic often goes out the window. Yeah.
Like, no, that's mine. No, it's really mine.
And even if it's yours, it's mine.
Exactly. You signed for it. See? It's the same concept.
Yeah. But, as a solo lawyer, I think that the lawyers that work in bigger firms where there's a lot of support staff and a lot of infrastructure, they have a way of doing things that can be very efficient, but I think it can also be very inefficient. Being a solo lawyer, I have to be efficient, or else I'm losing money. I'm either losing clients or losing respect or something, and there's just a lower tolerance for inefficiency and some of the silliness that you see out in the big law environment. But that said, everything's a trade-off, right?
Well, that's what it is, right? I mean, it's a give and take situation, right? So you choose your poison really at this point, it is what it is. The legal industry in and of itself is a very chaotic, multitasking, deadline driven, all the things, right? And the court system is not much of a help either, right? They just add to the fire at this point.
What is that old saying about practicing law would be a delight if it wasn't for the clients, the other lawyers, and the judges?
That's what it is, right? So it's like pick your poison. A lot of people are like,
Yeah.
well, why are you even a legal professional? And I was
Right.
like, you know what? You just gotta love it. It's one of those things, right?
Yeah.
Just like a medical doctor, that's not my thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Not something I want to do day in and day out and deal with, illnesses and
Yeah.
diseases and things like that. I rather deal with politics. All right. Like we were saying, right? It's pick your poison. It's pretty much, dealing with everything else, right? Our jobs can be easy. It's kind of like life. We like to complicate things, right? Life can be simple, but we like to just add to the fire, like you said. It's the same thing, right? Law is
Yeah.
pretty much straightforward, but people complicate it sometimes.
Well,
And it's a per situation thing, right? It's a per
yeah, I
situation.
mean, this is, I would say, among the higher stress professions. I mean, we're not flying airplanes, and if we don't do it right, we're going to crash and kill 200 people. We're not doing surgery that is, someone could die or something like that. Like, occasionally there are life and death situations in the law, but we do carry a tremendous burden of responsibility for our clients, their businesses, and sometimes our clients' businesses are hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And if we get something wrong, it could be really, really problematic. So lawyers are stressed out people.
Yeah, all the time. And on top of that, there's outside responsibilities, right? Which is what
Mhm.
the legal support staff or the third parties or the vendors, they don't
Yeah.
really understand that, right? They're not really seeing the full picture. Like we only present 10% of ourselves is what they say on average.
Right.
People only understand 10% of you because that's what they know and that's what they see. And
Mhm.
lawyers are humans, right? They have spouses, they have families, they have hobbies, they have things outside of the quote unquote law firm that also, right, induce the anxiety and the stress and the trying to balance and not missing the classes and the recitals and the games and all that stuff. So I don't think people understand that. They don't see all of it, right? And then on
Right.
top of that, they're trying to manage people, trying to manage clients, trying to manage their cases. And it can be no wonder, right? We are at the top. I think it's the top 10% of suicides,
Mhm.
anxiety, Adderall abuse, alcohol abuse. We are there,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Legal professionals as a whole, I know that for sure.
And one of the things they don't really teach in law school, or really up until you're out on your own doing it, is they don't teach us that we have to be salespeople. They don't teach us how to manage the business or the marketing and advertising or the budgeting and the finances. And they don't teach us how to manage people. All they teach us how to do is think like a lawyer. And I would say that's antithetical to a lot of those other things. So the training out of us some of those um, human skills of just getting along with people and so on. So for some people, it's inherent that we're inclined to the lawyer style of
I
things.
know, I know.
Um,
And it's the same for legal professionals, right? With their
yeah.
certifications and their education, there's a huge gap, right? And that's what
Mhm.
the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast is all about, is
Yeah.
about kind of alleviating that gap and really shining that light in between
Mhm.
the legal studies and the actual practicing of law. There's a huge gap, unfortunately. And
Mhm.
so, human intelligence is now all of a sudden a skill that needs to be learned when back in the day, that wasn't really a thing. We were
Yeah.
just really nice to each other,
Mhm.
and we were empathetic and understanding normally because it was the survival of the fittest. You either survived or you didn't. You either
Right.
got along or you didn't. You either got the territory or you didn't. I'm talking about primal.
Sure. Sure.
We're going back, right, to the caveman years. And understanding how simple life was and can be, and yet again, right, the whole point about complicating things. Now, I really
Yeah.
want to focus on your podcast, though. I love it.
Sure.
The podcast lawyer, easy legal. Like, what's going on here? I love how how did that come about? Because podcasting wasn't really like popular when you first started, right? So,
Yeah.
like, kind of walk me through that process.
Well, let me start by saying I'm a complete geek, right? I just love technology. I love computers. I love toys, and I was a sound technician in live theater before I went to law school. Did some television and film production as well before I went to law school. So I was destined to do entertainment law from the very beginning.
Yes.
And when I came out and I went out on my own, and I realized I came to this sort of harsh reality that I've got to market and sell my services as a lawyer. I went looking for, how do you do it? And the traditional ways that lawyers were doing it, this is in the early 90s, was, sending out a newsletter or holding what seminars if you had certain kinds of practices, and they still do. And those are great tools. Well, I did a newsletter. I started publishing a print newsletter and putting stamps on those things, mailing them out and all that. And as soon as the World Wide Web internet technology sort of became available, I was one of the earliest adopters of a website. And I got the domain FireMark.com and started my website, which at the time was really just sort of a billboard you drove by on the highway there, right? But I started looking for ways to make it more dynamic. And I took the newsletter content and I started putting it on the website. And I actually got a book and learned how to code some stuff so I could create a database-backed thing that nowadays we call database-backed websites, blogs. At the time, that wasn't around. So I had built this thing and I'm starting to do that. And then I said, okay, how can I send this out by email so I don't have to put stamps on things? So the email newsletter came about. And around that, it was I would say the early 2000s now when I sort of started following some folks in the technology space who very swiftly moved into the podcasting arena. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And they were, taking a radio show or television show and turning it into this other thing delivered over the web. And I was fortunate. I got invited to be a guest on a couple of shows. And then that led to a recurring thing on someone's podcast. And I had the technology and I knew the sound stuff. I knew the computer. So I was able to make it all work. And then when the guy who was hosting the show, where I was the co-host, actually his boss threatened to fire him if he didn't stop moonlighting. So we stopped the show and I thought, well, this is too much fun. I'm having a good time. So that's around 2007, 2008. And I spent some time figuring it out and I found a co-host and I started my show. It's called Entertainment Law Update. We started in April of 2009. So wow. Next month, we're recording this in March of 2013. We celebrate 14 years doing the show.
Congratulations. That's a big milestone, especially in the pod. For those of you that don't understand the podcast world, it's a sink or swim situation. And it's something that you have to be super persistent about. And if you're not day in and day out, it's just like a business, right? It's starting a business. So
it is. And we had to come to an agreement about it's my show and she's the co-host and how are we going to do things? And I built a team around creating the show, and it's a monthly show, so it's not quite as hard as if we were doing it weekly. But we're coming up on episode 156 or 7, I think. So that's pretty consistently every month for all those years, and it's a little like being in a marriage or a relationship. We have to navigate each other a bit.
Here we go again with the whole thing, right?
Yeah, the metaphors of my life, right? So anyway, we've been having a good time, and I've started a couple of other shows over the years, and I've learned that it's a great way to market myself as an expert in my field. Now, creating a show, Entertainment Law Update, that really only appeals to other entertainment lawyers and professionals in the field, and maybe students who are studying the field. I'm training my competition. I'm not really reaching my audience directly, my client base directly, but it's great to have as a calling card. When they go searching for me because someone's mentioned my name or they're looking for the magic keywords entertainment lawyer, it shows up and they see, oh, well, this guy's talking about this stuff all the time and he's looking at all these cases. And frankly, it makes me a better lawyer because I'm paying attention to what's going on in the field. But they see it and it's good for the search visibility. And other lawyers who need to refer stuff, they often point it my way because they've heard me talk and they know my personality and my style. And, it helps to build that know, like, and trust aspect of marketing. Yeah. And so I started the podcast, 14 years. We're going strong, having a great time. And I really do think it's a terrific marketing tool for professionals in any profession, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it has done wonders for me, and I'm super young. We're only 3 years in right now, but it definitely helped my, there's a lot of paralegal firms out there, especially now with all these limited licensings passing and, now they're full-fledged, right? There's a whole firm that's just paralegals because of the limited licensings being passed in several states around the country. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't say competition because I don't really offer like direct paralegal service, kind of like what paralegal firms do. I'm more in the legal education realm, but it's been great to, like you said, for exposure, networking, expanding the brand into other things, speaking engagements, because I know you do those as well.
Yeah.
It's just a wonderful opportunity, and it opens doors that you never even knew existed up until you joined the podcasting world.
Yeah. And, I said it made me a better lawyer. It makes me a better lawyer. It does also help me crystallize practice area and position me as an expert in a couple of areas. And as you mentioned, not only do I do a podcast, but as an entertainment lawyer, I've worked in theater and film and television and digital media. I've really been able to put some emphasis into my practice in the area of podcast and digital media, to the point where I'm now known as the podcast lawyer.
Yeah, that's what I loved.
And that positioning is tremendously valuable. And it's allowed me to create a lot of online resources and forms and templates, and a course you see on my shirt here called Easy Legal for Podcasters that trains people to do some of the stuff themselves, so that I, as a lawyer, when they need me, can really focus on sort of higher level, deeper dive kinds of tasks. And I think it just maximizes the kind of efficiency that we really look for, especially as a solo lawyer.
Oh, absolutely. You have to. There's no other way. And it's organic, right? Because it's more one-on-one, you feel, because you feel like you're speaking to them and they're actually listening. It's more intimate. So you create more stronger, I guess, connections.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's a great referral service. So like it's just a bountiful, tool that I feel like, well, now maybe not so much. Now I feel like there's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot. Like everybody I know is like, I have a podcast. But it's kind of like when you get that shiny new car and then you see it everywhere on the street. So maybe that's what it is. It could be the same concept. Who knows?
No, there are a lot of podcasts out there. The numbers look like right around 4 million podcasts in the world. But if you dig a little deeper and scratch the surface, you'll find out that, probably 3 million of those haven't put an episode out in 6 or 8 months. And among the million left, there's only a small percentage that have done episodes in the last 30 or 60 days. So the competition is still not too bad.
Yeah, no, it's not bad. I mean, we do one every week.
Yep.
But, we do take a nice little break. So, we ended in March and then we begin again in September. We'll do bonus episodes and things like that just to, keep it.
You got to seek balance. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, you have to. And I love it. I love everything that you do. I mean, you're amazing. I had the pleasure to meet you off the platforms. So, I saw your full-fledged happiness and just you as the person, not as the podcaster and the lawyer and all the things. And I have to admit that you were just amazing and you're so sweet. You're so genuine. And I think that's what really sets you apart because we're trying to change the narrative right now. A lot of people look at lawyers in a very negative light, thanks to Hollywood, as you would know personally, one-on-one, how they portray lawyers and legal professionals in general. And it's nice to see that it's not all true, that there's other, there's still good people out there, still good legal professionals and lawyers really working day in and day out to provide the best services possible. And I appreciate that. I appreciate you highlighting that. I appreciate you putting your best foot forward every day, no matter how tired or how busy your schedule is. And thank you for coming on the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. I hope this is not our last conversation and hope to talk to you soon.
Well, that's great. Thank you for having me. And thank you for such kind words. I really do believe that balance and having a full life is what's important. And I would say one thing I would say for folks who are working in law firms who maybe aren't the owner of the law firm, the support staff and so on, you're going to encounter people having a rough day sometimes.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest red flag, if you're looking for the right opportunity, the right fit, someone who doesn't have other stuff going on in their life, they're the ones that are going to be the nightmare.
Oh, I love it. You know what? I never thought about it that way, but that is a good tip to have. I love it.
Yeah,
you're right, because they're focusing solely on the business and they don't have other focuses.
Yeah, when you're going home to a spouse and to your kids and things like that, assuming things are relatively good on those fronts, it balances you out. It takes you out of that adversarial lawyer, got to make it just right kind of mode. Because let's face it, life is messy. Kids are messy. Spouses are messy.
Yes.
Maybe that's a friction point for some people. But seeking a balanced lifestyle, and I think it goes for everybody. We have to have full lives, not just tunnel vision.
No, absolutely not. We need to have a little bit of everything. It's kind of like what is it, the Zig Ziglar, seven I guess 7 portions of your life. You should have 7 things
Yeah,
and focus
yeah,
on a little bit of everything daily. So we'll put that as a visual on the YouTube
great.
version of this so everybody
Sounds good.
knows what the hell I'm talking about.
Cool.
Support staff and how you feel lawyers can benefit from legal support staff, how we can engage better together, and that communication between the support staff and the attorneys.
Well, even though I am a solo lawyer, that just means I'm the only lawyer in the company. And the truth is, I don't have any full-time employees, but I do work with virtual assistants, and I do, when I have projects that I need the help, I hire on a project basis, and I use paralegals. I use, like I said, virtual assistants, sometimes law clerks, students, and so on. Actually, on the podcast, we have a team. We've got 7, either well, a couple of them are retired lawyers, and a couple of them are practicing, and a couple of them are students, and they help me put together the summaries for the show and everything. And we try to give them a clear articulation of what's expected, and then let them go and do their thing. I hold a meeting once a week with the podcast team, where we just sort of discuss which stories are going to be in the rundown for the coming show, and anything else that's going on in the law that we want to keep an eye on. And then when it's time, they go off and write the summaries that my co-host and I work from. And I don't really feel much need to intervene and manage and control how they do it, as long as it gets done. And I try to take the same approach when I have a project that I'm hiring temporary staff for or whatever. But I'd say what's important is if the staff person doesn't understand the assignment or doesn't understand the context, you need to ask. And sometimes that'll rub a lawyer the wrong way. What, you don't get it. What do you mean you don't, those kinds of things. But if you manage it right, look, the more context I have, the better I can do this job the way you want it the first time. So please spend another 3 minutes with me and help me understand what you're looking for, or why we're doing it this way, or whatever. That kind of interaction, if you make it worth their while, essentially, I think that'll be great. The thing to remember about lawyers is most of us bill for our time. So a minute spent on a non-billable task is money out of our pocket. Whether I'm solo or working in a firm, there's expectations of how much I'm going to bill each week, each day, each month, whatever. And if I'm not meeting that, then someone's not going to be happy with me, whether that's the managing partner or
your bank account.
I was going to say the lady in the other room in the house who's looking at the bank accounts and saying, "Hey,
that's right,
got bills to pay, pal. Get back to work." And so that's one of the stressors that we feel. And as I mentioned earlier, also that tremendous pressure to do the right thing and to crusade for our clients and so on. We have to project that knight in shining armor image, even if the chinks in the armor in the back are there. And the folks that work in the firm with us, they're the ones that see those chinks in the armor. And so that feeling a little vulnerable to those people probably motivates a lot of the animosity and anger and harshness that you might experience with lawyers. But yeah, as you said, we're all humans. We're all having our own experiences of the day. It's not just this moment. And it's also, practicing law is not as sexy as we all thought it was going to be when we went to law school. And so there's maybe a little feeling of disappointment or whatever. And you know what? The clients are sometimes just a big pain.
Yeah.
And the paralegals, and the support staff, if you're answering the phone call, if you're fielding the inquiry, you may experience some of that, but ultimately everything is on the lawyer's shoulders. If you screw up, it's the lawyer's fault. If the assistant greets them unpleasantly, it's the lawyer's fault. If the phone rings 4 times instead of 3, it's the lawyer's fault. And so, please, if you're helping lawyers, do what you can to minimize that sort of friction, and everything will be better for everybody.
Yeah, and I love how you said ask questions, ask for clarification, because I'm always telling them to speak up, right? Sometimes, I remember when I used to work in big law here in South Florida, I worked for a really huge law firm that had multiple law firms nationwide, and our clients were big. There were banks, it was just very high-end clients, and you can always tell when one of those clients were coming in because they were, all suited up and fancy suits and, things like that. And we'd even get an email like the day before if they were expecting them. Everybody, please be on your best behavior. Please dress properly. Like, don't, do this. And we all knew that a client was coming in, at least a day in advance. So anyway, I worked at this law firm and we'd have these huge meetings, right? Because there was literally thousands of us. Some of us were virtually on the conference. Some of us were physically in the conference room. I mean, it was a huge law firm. And so we're sitting there, because we were in the corporate office, so we always had to go physically. So we're sitting there and they're talking about the new policies or new procedures that we need to do depending on what client we work with, because they had us in little silos and divided us in teams. And then at the end of the meeting, I would hear all these people complaining about how it's not going to work because the client system doesn't talk to our system, and this, like, all these really good points, right? Like, oh, well, that's something that they need to know because they don't work in that part of the system, right? We're the ones that are working it. They wouldn't know that, right? So here I'm thinking, well, if you have solutions and you have suggestions, and obviously if it's going to assist in the efficiency, which is why we're doing all these changes, I'm assuming, right? Because I was just, I was maybe in my 5th or 6th year of a paralegal and litigating. I was new at it. I was only maybe like 2 or 3 years in as a litigating paralegal. And so I'm thinking more logically. I was like, well, that's that's a valid situation. Why don't we talk to, whoever we need to talk to? And they're like, oh my gosh, never. Oh my, and I'm like, well, I mean, you're sitting here complaining about how it's not going to work, and then they're going to implement it, and then you're just going to complain even more because now you're like forced to do the one thing that you knew that it wasn't going to. So I'm like, what is going on here, right? Nobody wants to talk. Everybody's either afraid or whatever the case may be. So I was like, well, forget it. I'm going to say something. And I would go to the manager and I'd be like, hey, listen, there was a valid concern that I overheard. I feel like this is important. Maybe you guys should investigate it a little further, see if there's a solution, see if there's an integration process or whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, they would actually listen because they're like, wow, that is a valid concern. Well, I didn't even think about that. So it's like, what are you afraid of? The worst thing that they can say is no. Like, it's like, what's going on here? And if they fire you, well, maybe that wasn't the place you were supposed to be. Like, I'm just saying, if they're not going to listen.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be said for choosing the time and place carefully and the words carefully. You never want to embarrass the senior people with the clients, and you never want to project anything less than absolute competence for what you're doing. But if you don't know, don't understand, and you don't ask, then that's the worst kind of incompetence. If you don't know, I guess that's the really worst. So yeah, I think that, communication is key, like in any relationship, but also choosing the time and place carefully, because, let's be really honest about the nature of the law practice. The client comes to me because they've got a problem. One of my problems is, can I get this thing done right and well and efficiently and on time and meet all of the, and affordably for the client? So if I assign the work to somebody or a portion of the work to somebody and they don't deliver, that's my biggest worry. Okay, I gave it to you. I'm trusting you. I'm relying on you. You let me down once, shame on you. If it happens a second time, shame on me. So I'm going to be tough about it. If you don't understand what I need or what I want and you don't ask, that's letting me down. Even if I let you feel like it's not, it's bad news, don't make your problem my problem later.
I like that. That's a good one. I'm going to take that from you.
Anybody's job working in a law firm is to solve other people's problems. Yeah. And problems should always flow downhill, not uphill.
Absolutely.
Solutions
go the other direction. The client's already in disarray, right? They're already going through something, right? That's affecting their daily life or whatever it is, or a portion of their life, whatever practice, you're in, it doesn't really matter at this point. So they're already in disarray. They're already anxious, stressed, or nervous, in pain, physically, emotionally, whatever it is. So they're already in this uncomfortable, what I like to call the uncomfortable, the unknown stage, right? Because they're coming to us because one, they can't do it themselves. Obviously, that's why, they hired somebody to do it for them. And two, they don't know, they're at a loss, they're freaking out. And so like, I feel sometimes we don't put ourselves, maybe not in their shoes, because I don't think there's ever a reality where that can actually be a real thing. But we don't put the empathy and the understanding, right? We don't meet them where they're at and kind of sit down with them and take those few moments and really understand, wow, they're really going through something, regardless of what it is, they're going through something, right? And they're here because they need our help. And I feel like sometimes when we make a mistake, some of us are really hard on ourselves and some of us are like, whatever, so it really depends. I think life is all about reaction too.
And it's funny, you brought up mistakes, and look, mistakes happen. We all make them. It's really not about whether we fix them or we let them be somebody else's problem. And sometimes there's no way around it. It's going to be somebody else's problem. But if you make a mistake, you have to own it. Don't bury it. Don't hide it. I mean, if you lie, forget it. You're out. But what's the old saying? The employee comes in to the boss and says, listen, I made a mistake, cost the company $15 million. Are you going to fire me? And the smart boss says, hell no, I just spent $15 million to train you so you don't make that mistake again.
I like that.
So, it's always about looking at the opportunity, finding the opportunity in disadvantage in these negative situations, and obviously do what you can to make it right, do what you can to make it to fix it, and don't, like I said, don't make it a problem, make it an opportunity if you can.
I love it. And then, I feel like we're always so fast paced, right? Because we're always, like I said, chasing deadlines and tasks and the chaos of the legal industry as a whole. But, sometimes multitasking is not really the best thing you should be doing. If you're working on a case, focus on the case, right? And don't like swap, in the middle of trying to draft something, especially everybody loves the copy and paste. And we all have those templates. We all have something where we can kind of go off of, but understanding that you should really do a thorough editing and do your checks and balance, right? I mean, that's the whole legal industry in a nutshell.
I mean, we can train monkeys to fill in forms.
Yes.
The job is to fill it in and then look at it and make sure, does this actually accomplish what we think it's supposed to accomplish?
Absolutely. That's what makes us different from a computer, right? Because a computer, ChatGPT has taught us that you can just put information in there and it'll spit it back out. But understanding that we still need to look at it, review it, make sure it's accurate, make sure the resources are accurate. I mean, that's what creates that human element to the legal industry, right? If not, we'd just be a whole bunch of robots. And I feel like sometimes there's a lot of taskers out there. There's just a lot of people that just do what needs to get done, which is sometimes the bare minimum and not the greatest. And unfortunately, clients are paying high dollar, for these services. So, give them what they pay
for. So it ought to
for.
be valuable. It's funny. I was just at a conference last week and I stayed at a hotel, and this hotel charged a, modest room rate and a fairly steep, what they call a resort fee. And then I'm in the hotel, and this is just an example, of metaphor. I'm in the hotel, and the first night I slept, and I got up and I went and did my thing, and I came back at 4:00 in the afternoon, and the room hadn't been made up, and the pool was closed, and there were 5 or 6 other things. And on my last day there, I actually checked out a day early after the conference ended. I was planning to stay overnight the next night. I checked out, and I told the woman, I said, look, if you're going to charge a resort fee, this should feel like a resort, not a Motel 6. And they actually accommodated my objections and waived the resort fees and things like that. But, the point being, they had to make an accommodation because I was feeling I wasn't getting the value I was paying for.
Absolutely.
Clients approach things the same way, except they don't come and tell you should waive this, or sometimes they do, but more often what they do is they go find another lawyer. And that's the stress that.
And leave bad reviews and no referrals, and you lose a lot more than just a client. You lose business, right? So, and reputation is everything. So unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people see the full picture. And honestly, as a legal support staff for 15 years prior to opening my business, I probably didn't see it either, because I didn't know what it was to own a business. But now that I own a business, and then I know that this is my baby,
Yeah.
And I'm very picky
Mhm.
on who I onboard and all that stuff for my company. I
Yeah.
now understand, wow, so a lawyer was
Yeah.
doing this plus this plus this plus this. And sometimes you meet them at a bad time in their life.
Yep.
I no longer say, not that I never did, but I no longer say that I had a bad boss. I just had
Mhm.
I caught them at the wrong time in their life, just a bad season,
You
right?
heard how I described my first job out of law school, right? Same
Yeah.
thing.
So, I think we just all grow and perspective. And the more we learn, the more we
Yeah.
lessen our ignorancy and the more we really enhance our
Yeah.
skills, but also ourselves. I think we'll just become better legal professionals.
Even for employees, exactly what you're saying, but even if you're an employee and you've got that sort of job security of a steady paycheck and those kind of things, and you're a cog in a machine, right? But part of your job is always going to be selling the bosses, the larger cogs, the other parts of the machine, why they need you, that cog in the machine.
Mm.
And the way you do that is by saying, hey, this is the problem I solve for you. And the moment you don't solve the problem, or the moment it becomes more expensive to have you solve it than someone else, that's when, okay, we're going to get a different cog, right? So even if you're not engaged in selling your services, you're engaged in selling your services to your boss.
Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate
Well, it's
everything. I really do.
thanks,
It's
Etta.
amazing.
It's been a real pleasure being here, and
I
thank you
just
for
love
having
it.
me.
I
And
loved your feedback. I loved
hope I
your
gave
point
you
of
good
view.
stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Great, great.